So we're going to start talking about the Mycenaean civilization, which is a civilization which thrived on the Greek mainland, especially during the late Bronze Age. And I wanted to start by talking about what's going on in the Greek mainland in the early and middle Bronze Age. We had said that the Neolithic period was defined by small farming villages of just like a couple hundred people who were engaged in agriculture, as well as probably still hunting and gathering, and that bronze was slowly being introduced. It was creating kind of distinction between an elite, which could access it, and the commoners who could not. And this is true of the sites of mainland Greece throughout the early and middle Bronze Ages, really. They don't change significantly from this model. There's nothing as advanced as we see in terms of administrative structure or artistic output or anything like that as we saw in the Minoan culture, which is very active on the island of Crete in the Aegean. Now, before we really talk about the rise of the Mycenaean civilization and what it's like, I want to talk about this period right before it kicks off, because there's an interesting phenomenon which happens. So, around 1600 BC, we begin to see evidence for very wealthy and powerful individuals showing up on mainland Greece. So, one of the sites where this happens is the site of Mycenae, which is in the Peloponnese. And there are two burial sites, grave circles A and B. And they're called grave circles because they are really, truly circles. They are defined by a wall which has been built around each. And within these circles are what are known as shaft graves. So in a shaft grave, I mean, it's just what it sounds like. You just build a shaft down from the ground, right? And then you deposit the body in there with its burial goods. And then you cover the whole thing over, right? So there are these deep shafts. They're not the fanciest burials, but they definitely take much more time and effort to do than a simple pit burial where you really just put right under the ground. So, it's a little confusing because grave circle B is the earlier grave. So the burials in grave circle B date from the 17th century to about 1500 BC. And these burials are not that wildly different than you might see for an elite burial. They do contain some local pottery, that's not unusual, some bronze weapons, that's a little nicer than we might find in other burials in mainland Greece, but it's not too unusual. When we get to grave circle A, though, and this is the later grave circle, its burials date from about 1600 BC to 1500 BC. The burials in grave circle A are incredibly wealthy. We see tons of weapons, silverware, right? Silver dishes and pitchers and things like that. We see gold jewelry. We see pieces made of faience and precious gems and amber and ivory. We see goods that are clearly imported that have been made in Egypt and the Near East. An incredible amount of wealth is contained within these burials. And it's not just at Mycenae. Now, this is actually a fairly new discovery, but at the site of Pylos, which is also in the Peloponnese, in the southwestern part of the Peloponnese, we have very recently found a burial that's similar to that of grave circle A in Mycenae. It's known as the Griffin Warrior grave, and it is another shaft grave. It was found just in 2015, so it is still in the process of being excavated and studied, but the finds from it are very incredible. It's kind of the most notable archaeological discovery for the Mycenaean world in probably 75 years. So this man, he's called the Griffin Warrior. He was buried with a large amount of weapons, first of all, but also gold jewelry, precious gems, ivory, bronze, rings, with beautiful craftsmanship. Again, a level of wealth, which is very notable and very distinct from pretty much everywhere else in the Greek world. Now, along with these specific burials in Mycenae and Pylos, we also see throughout the Greek mainland, we see the rise of what are known as Tholos Tombs. So this is my bad drawing of a Tholos tomb. A Tholos tomb, it's also known as a beehive tomb because of its shape. It's a type that you can find in the Minoan world, and so it's clearly copied from them. But the idea is you build this beehive-shaped chamber, and there's stone along the walls, right? It's built of stone. And then there's this little passageway that you use to enter it. And then the whole thing is kind of covered over with dirt, right? So it's kind of slightly buried underground, but you can still access it through the entryway there. And then the burial is here inside the Tholos. This takes a large amount of effort. You have to be able to command labor, for instance. You have to be able to afford the materials that are needed to build it. So this, again, represents a pretty notable level of wealth and authority. So the issue with these burials is really that they all date to before 1500 BC, we said. Before 1500 BC in mainland Greece, we don't really have any kind of societal infrastructure that can support this kind of level of wealth and authority. There is not palaces bringing in tribute like you have in the Minoan world. There are not organized kingdoms. People are mainly living in these small farming villages, and there's not necessarily a high level of prosperity or wealth. So the question is, who are these people, right? Where did they come from? Where did they get this money from? There are a number of theories. There are some people who say, well, clearly they arrived or they lived in Greece and they did manage to create some kind of kingdom that could allow them to funnel wealth to themselves. And there's just not a lot of evidence for what they did existing in the archaeological record. Some say they're Minoans who came over with tons of wealth and tried to establish themselves as lords in the Mycenaean world. Some say they're very wealthy mercenaries that maybe went and fought in Egypt or the Near East somewhere and came back with tons of wealth that had been their payment for their service. We just don't know the answers to these questions. But this is just what's happening right before the rise of the Mycenaean civilization. It's a kind of an omen of things to come, that this sudden appearance of a group of people who must have commanded a large amount of wealth and authority to be able to have this level of elite burial. Okay, in the next video then we're going to get into the Mycenaean civilization proper. Thank you guys for watching. Bye!